Hello everyone. In this video, you are going to learn relationships and cardinality. Before diving into relationships, let us first see what data models are. A data model is an abstract representation of organizations' data elements and associations between them. Data models provide a blueprint for how the data is stored and organized in a database, such as tables, fields, and relationships between tables. Don't confuse data model and schema. A data model is a high level representation of how data is organized, while a schema is a detailed description of the structure of a database. A data model provides the blueprint for creating a schema which is then used to physically implement the database. Relations, on the other hand, refer specifically to the relationship between tables in a relational database. Relationships are established by linking data in one table with data in another table using a common field which is known as a key. In SQL, relationships between tables are established using primary and foreign keys. As you have already seen, a primary key is a unique identifier for each record in a table, and a foreign key is a reference to the primary key of another table. There are three types of relationships in SQL. The first one is one to one relationship or 1 colon 1. This arrow is used to denote this type of relationship. Then we have one to many relationship or 1 colon capital N, and this is used to denote one to many relationships. The third one is many to many relationship, and this arrow is used to denote many to many relationships. The arrow head is a perpendicular line. When the arrow starts and ends in a table with multiple relationships, the arrowhead is of a crow foot shape. Okay, now let's look at these relationships one by one with some example. A one to one relationship. In a one to one relationship, one and only one record in one table is related to one and only one record in another table. A primary key in one table becomes a foreign key in the related table. For example, in table A, we have a column school, and in table B, we have column head teacher. And one school can have only one head teacher. So the relationship between these tables is 1 to 1. And that's why in both sides of the table, you see the arrow, that is the perpendicular sign. One to many relationship. A one to many relationship exists between two tables when one record in one table is related to multiple records in another table. For example, in table A we have a column school, and in table B we have a column teacher, and one school can have many teachers. So the relationship between these tables is one to many. And that is why you can see the perpendicular sign at the left table and the crow footed symbol towards your right. A many to many relationship. A many to many relationship exists between two tables when multiple records in one table are related to multiple records in another table. For example, in table A, we have a column pupil, and in table B, we have a column lesson. Many pupils can have many lessons. So the relationship between these tables is many to many. And that's why you can see the crow footed shape at both sides of the arrow. Let's take a look at an example from our search engine case study database. In the user table, we have the user ID, which is unique and serves as the primary key. In the user activity table, we also have the user ID, but this time it is a foreign key and it refers to the user table. Keep in mind that the user ID is not unique in this table. If we examine the tables user and user activities, we can see that one user with a unique ID can have multiple query IDs, and user queries can click on many pages. This is why the relationship between these two tables is one to many. The same goes for the relationship between the user and the user past activities table. An entity. An entity is a representation of an object or concept in the real world that exists independently and has a clear and distinct identity. For example, in a database for a school, entities might include students, courses, instructors, departments, and classrooms. Each entity represents a unique object or concept and has its own characteristics or attributes which describes it. For example, The student entity might have attributes such as student ID, name, and address, while the course entity might have attributes such as course code, title, and instructor. In our search engine example, a user is a real world entity having certain attributes and has some past and current activities on our search engine. Here, the user is the entity since they have their own attributes. Till now, we have learned what are relations and entities. Now, let us jump to a concept called as entity relationship diagram. Entity relationship diagram, or in short, ER diagram. It is a graphical representation of entities and their relationships to each other. This helps in understanding of the big picture, including all the abstract relationships in database. There are three elements in ER diagram. Those are entity, relations, and attributes. You have already learned what are entity and relations. Now let us see what are attributes. Attributes are characteristics or properties of an entity that describe and differentiate it from other entities. For example, in search engine database, an entity user might have attributes such as user ID, language, country, and city. These attributes describe the properties of each user in the database and allow us to differentiate one user from another. These tables and the relations you've just seen. Let's see how their ER diagram would look like. The texts on the screen are looking familiar, but you must be wondering what these different shapes means. Now, in ER diagram, there are different symbols used to depict different elements such as entity, relation, attributes, etc. Let us look at those symbols. An entity is represented by a rectangle which contains the entity's name. It can be a person, place, or anything. Entity has a primary key which distinguishes from other categories. The next is weak entities. It depends on some other entity type. They don't have primary keys and have no significance in the diagram without their parent entity. Attribute. Attribute is represented by oval shape which contains the attribute's name. This rhombus-like shape is used to denote relationship between two connections and the name of the connection is written in middle of it. In a mandatory relationship, every instance of one entity must participate in a relationship with another entity. Now, there are a lot of symbols that are used in ER diagram. You have looked at the important ones. In the LMS, you will be provided with a reference link to explore the other symbols. So, as we've got insight on different symbols of ER diagram, now let us go back to our example ER diagram. In this example, user is considered an entity because it has its own primary key and attributes. Past activities and user activities are considered weak entities because they are referred to by the user table through their foreign key, that is, user ID. Without the user entity, user activities and past activities would have no significance. The attributes of different entities are denoted inside the oval shape. For example, the weak entity, which is past activities, has the attributes user ID, user query, page clicked, and engagement. These lines denotes mandatory relationship between the entities and attributes. Note that these are not denoting relationships between the tables. The lines with this rhombus-like shape is denoting relationships between different tables. For example, this denotes relationship between table user and user activities. And the table user activities contains the attributes which are performed by entity user. So the relationship is named as perform here inside the rhombus. Similarly, I encourage you to identify the meaning of different symbols of this example ER diagram. Cardinality. Cardinality is the number of unique values in a column of a database. It represents the relationship between the data in two different tables by highlighting how many times specific entity occurs in comparison to another. In this example, user ID has so many unique values, so it is mentioned as high cardinality. In this example, user city is mentioned as medium cardinality, since city will always have an average number of unique entities, whereas the user language and user country will not have more unique entities and it might have repeated datas. So it is mentioned as low cardinality. So with this, the video lesson on relationships and cardinality has ended.